Good afternoon, friends. Welcome to the weekly meeting of OCPAC. My name is John Mishner. I'm the president. I'll be your host today. We always begin the meeting with prayer and a flag salute. But before we do that, let me ask you please to silence your cell phones. Turn those off, put them on mute, stomp on them, throw them out in the lake over there. So they won't disturb us during our backroom discussions of secret wheelings and dealings we're going to do here of the Liberty Movement that we then post publicly on Facebook. So I'd ask Tom Holmes, please, to come on up to the front to lead us in prayer. If you'll be standing, then right after that, Paul Kelly will lead us in the flag salute. Tom.
Let's pray. Our kind and loving Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day and all our blessings. We thank you that we could gather here to study more about your needs for our involvement. We pray and thank you for our speaker, Charles, and for all that he has done to advance the cause of freedom. Thank you for this food and pray that it will nourish our bodies and give us the strength to do your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Attention to colors and salute. Red. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. Y'all come on in, find a place. We've got some new folks coming in the door. If I could have some of my vice presidents maybe pass out the pamphlet that we're going to be discussing today. Saw the Black family come in over here. The Demies are coming in. You can sit there. That's my glass of water. Take over. Okay. Anybody have any announcements that we should make for the group before I get into my announcements and topics of discussion? Anybody have a Christmas party you want to invite us to or anything like that? All right. I'll go to it for you. You must not be looking forward to that one. Okay, let me remind you that it's the end of the year, and so it's time to renew memberships. We have forms on the back table. You need to fill out the form with your check or cash. That's for the Ethics Commission, so do that on your way out. I'd also let you know that we're working on a new website. We hope to get that up in the next week or two, and then we'll be able to do all of this stuff online. If you like to do stuff online, click buttons and use your credit card. This is going to be a one-stop shop where you can renew your membership, where you can buy banquet tickets and things like that. So I'm looking forward to that, rolling that out for you. Speaking of the banquet, mark your calendars, is Friday, February 10. Friday, February 10, 6:30 p.m. It'll be at the same place we had it last year. The food will be better than it was last year. The speaker will be just as good. The awards will be heartwarming and fun. We will probably pay special honor and tribute to some of those legislators who have retired this year, like Paul Wesselhoff, Dan Fisher, and Sally Kern. And it'll be a great evening of celebration together, but also a time to motivate these guys to stay the course, to continue to try to protect our life, our liberty, and our property. There will be a keynote address, a charge to the legislators to keep that focus and to keep that energy. So we hope you can be there for that. If you'd like to buy your ticket today, I don't have tickets made up, but we'll be taking names and adding you to the list. Those tickets will be $25 a piece. You can leave that with me or one of our vice presidents today. And again, we'll be sending out a link where you can purchase those online. Okay. Speaking of the banquet and the website, that means we also need to be raising money to pay for those things. And so I want to encourage you to check out our resource table and see if there's anything there that you would like. Contribute $1 or $2 and take things off the table. Let me highlight a couple of things that we have that you might be interested in. I've got a bumper sticker here that says "Exterminate Rhinos." That's kind of cute. We have several audio and DVD discs here from Pastor Matt Trahella when he was here last year. Some of these titles are "A Theology of Guerrilla Warfare," "Resist Tyranny," "The Duty of the Lower Magistrates in the Face of Tyranny," "Innocent Blood and America's Lesser Magistrates." And now we're back around to guerrilla warfare. But put $1 or $2 in our donation box and take those if you like. Okay. I think I'm ready to dive into today's program. So normally what we would do is we would talk about the topic, and then maybe at the end of the meeting, then we would start talking about strategy and application. But Charles is a great storyteller, and he's fun to listen to, and we might get carried away with his stories and with Q&A. So what I'd like to do is kind of introduce the topic here at the beginning and roll out our strategy to start with, and then if he runs all the way till 5 after 1, that's fine. We know what we need to do after that. So all of you should have in your hand a pamphlet called Stolen Government. Now, Charles is going to talk about the problem and the solution, but I just want to direct you to this pamphlet for a minute. There's a picture on the front. If you look at the picture with me, I've got it up on the screen above my head also. What you've got here is an Oklahoma politician, or really a politician from any state. He's a nondescript legislator. He's wearing a button that says, "Vote for me." Why does he want you to vote for him? So he can go to work for you, representing the people, protecting their lives, liberty, and property. The problem is you'll see a whole bunch of cash being dumped into his head from different lobby groups and Chamber of Commerce and other powers that be to help buy his election. And all that money pouring into his head makes it where he cannot see the truth, hear the truth, speak the truth. Thus the duct tape all around his head. Now once he gets elected, there's another problem. He's handcuffed. He can't do anything. And there's a roadblock in front of him. He can't go anywhere. Right here in this image, you see the problem. And so the first half of this little pamphlet is about the problem that we don't have a voice and we don't have real representation in our government and at our state capitol. Now, if you'll hold the pamphlet out in front of you and let it fall open to the middle where the staple is, that's a natural division point. And he did that on purpose. That was planned. And on the right-hand side is the solution to the problem. So like I said, the first half of the pamphlet is the problem. The second half of the pamphlet is the solution. And it falls right open to the solution. So these were not free to print. And they're not free to you either. Well, here's what we want to do. If you just want to take one of these for your own edification and you're going to read it and stick it on your shelf, we'd like you to give $5 to Charles Key, cash or check. But what this is really about is getting this information into the hands of our legislators so that they understand the problem and know what to do about it. What we'd like you to do is take 3 of them for $10 or 6 of them for $20, etc., and help us get these into the hands of the legislators before the new year. Because they're going to vote on the rules that they'll play by right after the new year, and if they capitulate to leadership, it's all over. Now, if any of you have been in sales, you understand that your best opportunity to make a sale, to get something done, to adequately communicate your point or idea is to do it face to face. That's the most effective method. So we'd like for you to take 3 of these, and we'd like for you to contact 3 senators or representatives. Maybe you have contact with them, you know them personally, maybe they owe you something and they'll take your phone call. But we'd like you to take 2 or 3 guys or gals in the Senate or the legislature and personally deliver this pamphlet to them. Then the second best thing you could do is drop it off to their executive assistant at the Capitol. You know, and as a last resort, we might mail these things. But we want to try and cover as many of these guys personally as we can. To that end, I've printed up a list of all the legislators, Senate and House, on 3 pages, and they're going to be on the round table as you go out the door. I've already signed up for 7 or 8 of these guys myself, and I'm going to hand deliver these things to them and say, please, please read this. And if you don't read it, you've got to understand, I don't have a voice. And you don't have a voice either, unless you're the Speaker of the Pro Tem, or you're willing to bargain your vote to get your legislation heard. We need a solution. We need you to act. Please read this before Christmas. So I'm involved in this, and we want all of you to be involved in this too. So however many of these pamphlets that you take out of here with you, please sign up on the sheet so that we know who's being covered. And we'll take your word that you're going to get this to them somehow, or to their legislative assistant. And then I'll do my best to find a way to get these to the others that aren't covered, even if I just have to mail them to their grandma's house at Christmas time. Okay. You can, by the way, if you have your membership money with you today, you can give it to me. I've got a little stack started up here for the new year. I'm taking money. I'll make sure the treasurer gets it. And let's see. I think we're ready to hear from Mr. Charles Key. He served in the legislature for 18 years. He did that under Democratic control and under Republican control. And he saw that nothing really changed except the letter after the name. Nothing new under the sun. It goes around and it comes around over and over again. Charles and I have been friends for a long time. We've been members of the same church family for about 18, maybe 20 years, something like that. We see eye to eye on a lot of things. He's a great friend, a smart man, a righteous man who loves liberty, and I'm looking forward to hearing his stories and peppering him with questions with you today. Please welcome Charles Key.
Thank you. Good to be back here with all of you. Thank you for being here, and thank you for all the work you do. The work you guys do here and have done over the years is just amazing, and nobody else is doing that. So who's going to look over the shoulder of our elected officials and try to keep them in line? Let me ask you this. Are you excited about the new session started and going up there and lobbying legislators again? No. Nobody's excited about that? How many of you have been doing it for more than one or 2 years? Just if you just raise your hand real quick. Been around for a while doing it. Come on, there's more. Okay. Have you ever felt like you were in that movie Groundhog Day? It's like, didn't we do this last year and the year before that and maybe the year before that? Maybe a few things change here and there, but it's just kind of deja vu all over again, like Yogi Berra said. That's because that's the way it is. They don't want to change anything. They want things to stay the same so they can keep things going like they always have. And I know many of you know this session. I know this issue really well, and I want to thank 2 or 3 people. Is your mom here? Yep. John, his mother, but even going back a little ways, where'd Porter go? Porter, got to thank him tremendously. He deserves a round of applause for a lot of things, but many of you... What's that for, right? Many of you are aware of this issue because we've been talking about it for off and on for quite a few years. And as John mentioned, when I first went into the legislature, I got elected in 1986. I ran in 84. I lost like a lot of people do. Won in 86. The Democrats were in the majority. I served for 12 years in a Democratic majority. After about 4 years, it just occurred to me when we go to our committee meetings, we'd file bills, and then we usually had bills that were going to really reform something. We're the minority party. We're trying to make some changes or make a statement. And then they wouldn't hear your bill. And it just started really striking me that, no, wait a minute. I just got elected. I'm one of 101 House members that got elected by about the same number of people in each district, about 38,000 people or so, 35, something like that. And I go up there, and I can't really represent my constituents. They won't let me. If I've got a bill to change something or to do something, I can only move that bill forward if they let me do it. So if you have 2 choices, like you got a glass of water and you got a glass of iced tea, and I give you those 2 choices, the waiter comes around and says, here's your 2 choices. Well, yeah, you've got a choice, but do you really have the freedom to decide what you want in terms of that, a drink? If you're only given the choices, then that's the only choices you have. You really don't have control. And that's really how most legislatures work in this country, including D.C. I say most. So this proposal is not anything new. Most of them say, oh, yeah, you've got freedom of choice. You can vote on anything you want to that comes before you, that we allow to come before you. You can get up and speak any time that you want to, as long as you follow the rules, and we let you do that, et cetera, et cetera. So what happens is people get elected to go represent their constituents. They go up there to try to address some issues, and they are limited, greatly limited as to what they can do. Most legislative bodies give all the power, almost all, or literally all the power practically, to the Speaker of the House and the Speaker Pro Tem of the Senate. They get to decide the committee chairs, the vice chairs, the membership of every committee, the assignment of every bill to a committee or committees if they choose they want to put it in multiple committees. And so they actually control everything. Well, we all know money's a big problem. So when you add these other influences of special interest and money to the equation, you can see, as most people in this group have been able to learn over the years, you can see why we have problems in this country and with our government and in the political realm. Because as one headline said when this was covered a few years ago, it was a great headline and a great story. It said, too few in control of too much. And that's what we're facing in this country primarily. A few people make the decisions, and the rest of us have to live with them and deal with it. There are a few states that either require or they allow the author of a bill to bring that bill forward or require it to be heard, but not in Oklahoma, and not in about 2/3 of the states. I think it's about 20 states have some provision that allow the bill to be heard if the author wants it heard. So how does this play out? John said I'm a good storyteller. That's just because I guess if you live long enough, you get a lot of stories. So, and I was up there a long time, so I've got a lot of stories. Here's one. I don't remember the exact year. It was probably 1990. Jim Reese. Some of you might know who Jim Reese is. Well, he and I went in at the same time together in '86. I think he's currently our agriculture secretary. Pretty conservative guy. He and I and another rep who's passed away that was from Tulsa, a real conservative guy also. He fit in Oak Pack perfectly. We're leaving the Labor, Industry, and Commerce Committee meeting, which was, of course, controlled by the Democrats. They're in the majority. And that committee was pretty much controlled by the labor unions. And so we were always having fits up there trying to interject bills or amendments or whatever, and always getting shut down. And we're walking out of that committee meeting room on the 5th floor one day, and we're three of us are walking along, and the one guy that's passed away was saying a few choice words about, there they go again. They wouldn't let us speak. They wouldn't let us offer amendments and stuff. And I said, well, Wayne, that's why this issue is so important, because it attacks fundamental representative government. It attacks a cornerstone of our system of government. Free speech, even, the ability to say and do. And he goes, yeah, but I'm just hoping. We were always thinking this, usually. We thought we were just on the verge, the Republicans have taken over. And he said, yeah, I'm just hoping next year we can take over and we can stick it where the sun doesn't shine, blah, 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 to them like they've been doing to us. I tell that story, it's a little graphic. I tell it because that's the attitude of the loyal minority back then. It's easy to get up there in the legislature and get caught up in the system, and you start developing these feelings and thoughts that, man, I hope we get in the majority and we're going to stick it to them like they've been sticking it to us. John mentioned, nothing changes, it seems like. And that's why, the feelings, the payback, the desire to have the power. Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely. It affects everybody. So it was right after that you wouldn't think this would happen. You think the good Republican conservatives would be fighting for transparency and openness and all that kind of stuff. I think it was the next election, next 2-year cycle. I was going from one floor to the next. Our minority leader stopped me in the middle, and I was starting to get some attention with this issue. Press wrote something about it. So our minority leader, I hate to call certain people out by name, but our minority leader at the time stopped me in the middle of that stairwell. He goes, Charlie, I got to talk to you about something. Out of the clear blue, I said, okay. He says, why are you pushing that issue about hearing the bills? And I said, well, I think it's right. It's the right thing to do. It's wrong that they have that practice. And he said, don't you understand? We won't be able to tell our constituents now when they come to us and want us to run a bill, we won't be able to tell them anymore that the committee chairman wouldn't let it be heard. I tried, but the committee chairman won't let it be heard. And frequently the way that works is you go to the committee chairman when you don't want to hear a bill like that, your bill that you filed for a constituent, and you say to the committee chairman, wink, wink, I really didn't want this bill myself. Somebody else wanted to run it. I don't care if it gets heard or not. So the chairman doesn't put it on the agenda, it doesn't get heard. You tell the constituent, hey, the committee chairman wouldn't hear it. Some of the shenanigans that are at play up there. Well, the bigger problem here is that it's not that they're not hearing every bill. This is a really important point, especially for those of you that are going to go up there and lobby the legislature or talk to anyone else about this. This is very important, what I'm getting ready to tell you. This issue is not about we must hear all the bills. On the contrary, and I'm against that. I don't think we ought to hear all the bills. We only ought to hear the bills that they're denying the opportunity for a hearing. It's really a relatively small number of bills. but it's the bills that most of us in this room would care about. Bills that are going to reduce taxes, reduce the size of government, cause more openness and transparency and efficiency and things like that. That's the bills they don't want to hear. Here's an example. In 2008, most of you will remember that we had on the ballot that year a bill that would nullify Obamacare. Does everybody remember that? Remember, it passed by like 65% or something like that. And most people thought that we nullified Obamacare. Actually, that bill that everybody voted on didn't nullify Obamacare. It only proposed to nullify the individual mandate of Obamacare that required everybody to purchase insurance. But, little side note, I'll take a little side trip down here. We passed that bill. That bill went before the people. We passed it. Has any of your state officials done anything to take up for you on that individual mandate? Not that I know of. Somebody might know something. Well, here's the back story on that. There actually was another bill that would have totally nullified Obamacare completely. Every bit of it, including it had penalties for anyone, including federal employees, agents, or whatever their title might be, that might try to enforce any aspect of Obamacare. It had penalties against anyone like that. That bill, like the other one, passed out of committee with a strong majority, and so you had that bill, the true nullification Obamacare bill, and then you had, I call it Obamacare nullification light, sitting out there. They both passed the committee. And we were asking our leadership, what's the holdup? Why don't you let these bills come forward? We want the nullification bill, those of us that were for nullification. And they kept saying, well, we're thinking about it. We're kind of adding everything up. We're trying to, think this through and blah, 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 whatever they said. And they eventually let the light version come forward. They would not let the nullification bill go forward. Well, if the nullification bill went forward, and I guarantee it would have passed just like the other one did. It would have passed the legislature. No legislator was going to vote against that. And the people would have passed it. But, again, too few in control of too much. A few decided what we got to vote on, the people and the legislature. I really believe if the state of Oklahoma would have truly passed a state question and a constitutional amendment like both of those were, that would have declared Obamacare nullified in the state of Oklahoma, I think it would have started a chain reaction, a domino effect around the country. We just needed somebody that had the guts to stand up and do it. So these are the kind of things, these are the kind of bills that are being stopped. Deja vu all over again. We go up there and we lobby, we knock on doors, we talk to them, and some of them will be disingenuous. That's a nice way of saying they'll just lie to you to your face and tell you things about, yeah, we're gonna push that bill forward. We're gonna get that bill on the next calendar for the committee, the next agenda. And then something often comes up and it doesn't get put on that agenda and doesn't get put on the next one, and all of a sudden time has run out. And they'll tell you, well, we're going to do this again. We'll look at it again next year. It's all part of the kind of the tricks of the trade. So this issue, I really truly believe I think it's the most important issue, and that's really hard to say because there's a lot of important issues out there. And we're in really a tough situation in this country, even though there's a lot of hope right now. Maybe things are going to turn around. But I think this is the most important issue because if you can't speak, if you can't say, if you can't do something, then you really don't have representative government. It doesn't really matter that much who you send up there until this rule changes. When this changes, then you'll have that bill on Obamacare nullification or a tax vote or whatever it is, and then you'll have a record of how people vote on it. And this is, of course, one of the main reasons they don't want to make this change. They want to keep the status quo because they want to keep the whole system going, where there's a lot of money flowing into PACs to legislators and their extra PACs that they've created, and et cetera, et cetera. So if we can get this change, I think we'll start seeing real big positive change in the state of Oklahoma, because you're going to have legislators that are true constitutionalist types, conservatives, whatever you want to call them, that are going to offer bills that are going to be meaningful and that will get a hearing and we'll be able to get votes on. And then you can go to a member's district and communicate with their constituents in an election year and talk to them about how their legislator voted incorrectly on an issue. So I think this is one of the biggest issues out there. The same problem exists in Washington, D.C. We know how much they are under control, the leadership up there. And so I think I'll open up for questions unless I'm forgetting something. John, is there anything I'm forgetting?
Well, let me jump in here and just reiterate the problem again, and then I want to ask you to talk about the solution before we take questions. I mean, this is the most important issue. It really is. Let's take these guys at the Capitol are going to follow the path of least resistance. They always do what's easiest for them, what's the least amount of risk for them. So you take last year, for example, we had 2 pro-life bills up there. One called abortion murder and was going to make the penalty for abortion the same as it would be if you were found guilty for murder. And we had another bill that just said, you'll lose your doctor's license if you do it. So which one do you think they went with? Right. The one that calls abortion what it is, murder, didn't get a hearing. You know, leadership is going to squash that. So whatever the issue is that's important to you, what they'll do is this is one of their smoke screens. There might be multiple bills out there, and one of them might be a pure principled bill that we really should get morally and legally, but they're not going to go for that because they're going to pick this other one, the light version, as you talked about. So changing this is the key to changing everything else. And so our government has been stolen. The answer, Charles keeps saying this issue, we're just going to call it open government. We need open government. We need open representation. So, Charles, talk to us about the steps. What are the different possible ways that we can institute open government at various levels? What do we need to do kind of step by step? Can you take us through that?
Well, when every 2 years we elect state representatives, and then we also elect half the Senate every 2 years, a new legislature is created. And it doesn't automatically have rules and, organization. It has to come in on a specified date according to law, and then organize, acquire rules, decide how they're going to function. Well, because of so many past legislatures, so much history, we've already got rules and things like that in place. So it's a seamless transition pretty much. But most people never think about that. So the first day of a 2-year session, which is going to be the first Monday in February, is the important day on this issue, because that is the day then there has to be some motion made to acquire rules, and it'll be some motion that sounds like this. Mr. Speaker, I move that we accept the rules from the previous legislature, whatever number it was, and make it this legislature's rules. That will be done. Now you've got rules, and then they'll entertain changing those rules, adding to them, subtracting, doing whatever. It doesn't always happen. That's the second part, but typically does. But in any event, that's the date that rules will be addressed by the House. The Senate does the same thing. If you don't address this then, here's what one would do, is they would file a proposed change to the rules like this is suggesting, and then that would be heard on the floor at that time. So they'd acquire the rules, make that motion, and then they're going to then be compelled to answer, and respond to any proposed changes to the rules. Sometimes there's a number of them, but a lot of them are just kind of cleanup language. That is the best way, the ideal way to change this. It's the best way to get it out in the open, right there in front of the whole world, and say, here's this problem, here's this issue, here's what we want to do. Now, we actually did that in 2011. I think it's the first time it ever happened. I think I was able to do that because the previous 2 years I'd sat with Chris Steele in the same desk on the floor. We got to be friends. And Chris is a nice guy, and regardless of his voting history or what have you, he's a nice guy. So when he became speaker in 11 and 12, they allowed my proposal to go forward, and it was heard on the House floor. I'll tell a little bit more about that story in just a second. So this is the time to do that. If it can be addressed then, they will allow it as opposed to not allow it. I don't think they'll try to stop it at this point if we have a legislator that will do it. And then it will get a fair up and down vote. It'll get Q&A. It'll get discussion and then a debate. And if it gets passed, then it's going to be, major change. It's going to be a huge victory for everybody that cares about a constitutional republic. Now, here's what happened last time. Last time we got up and there were several amendments that were addressed before they got to mine. And then when we got to mine, we started talking about it. A lot of interest. Went around for a long time. And then they had their designee get up. There's always somebody, as many of you know, that is one of two or three people that are kind of on call to get up and make a motion to table something or to I'm drawing a blank, somebody help me, move forward, forward the bill. There's a couple of other motions that are similar to that that's designed to try to stop it right there. It's also sometimes used as a test vote because there's all this interest back and forth, for and against, and they'll do that sometimes because they either want to stop it if they can. They'd like to stop it, but it's also a test to kind of see what the membership's thinking. They did that on that bill in 2011, and the vote came out 53 against tabling it to, I think it was 46 or 47 for. So we won that vote. And I remember as we were sitting there watching it, Sally Kern and Randy Terrell and some others sitting right there around me, we were all talking. And a lot of us were saying to each other, well, look, it looks like we just may win this thing. Well, they lost and we won. That means we went back to Q&A and discussion. Some of you were there and watched all this. So we continued to talk about it, and then it went to debated it, and then we voted again. Well, when we took the final vote, the votes were falling exactly the same as that other motion that I just described. And we would have won, and this would have been made a part of the rules. But then, as they do sometimes, they used to do this more often in the old days, a long time ago, the speaker, the leadership sent some people down the aisles to go talk to some members, a lot of freshmen, kind of maybe twist arms a little bit, convince them that they told them things like, the leadership is against this. If you want to be on the good side of the leadership, you don't want to be for this, blah, 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 statements like that. And so then you started seeing the votes kind of move back to the no column, and we lost it by 53 instead of win by 53. So it's good to know those kind of stories, know how it works, but really important, I think, for all of us here is to know that there is strong sentiment in favor of this in the legislature. John and I just met with some legislators last week. They feel very strongly about this also. They need help from people like us. They need people that will encourage them, that will also come up and lobby for this and help them, because it's tough for most people to go up there and say no to leadership, or just to stand right in the way of leadership and fight them. So they need our encouragement. So,
all right, yeah, let's do questions. Wave your hand in the air like you just don't care, and I'll come over. All right, here we go.
When we talk about doing something like this, they like to say, we got too many bills. We can't do that. We cannot do it. And how do you cut, if you have to cut down the numbers, they have some days off too. I don't know if they have Wednesday afternoon off and Friday off. I don't know if that's a possibility, but how can we do this whenever that's their answer?
Thanks for that question, because that's keeping me on track. I should have brought this up. One of the main arguments, I like what Wade Porter styled it, the ridiculous objections. They say, we got too many bills already. This is going to make us hear all the bills, and then we have to hear all these bills. You know how many bills we had this year? It's 2,543 and blah, 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 blah. It's all a bunch of baloney. It's a bunch of BS. That's blue smoke. Barbara Streisand, like Representative Ritz likes to say. It's not true. Now you're thinking maybe something doesn't add up here, right? We got a lot of bills that are being filed, so what am I talking about? I'm talking about, like I mentioned earlier, there's only a small number of bills that they deny because they don't want them to ever be heard or voted on. There are a lot of bills that get filed, and there are bills that never get heard. because the member doesn't want them heard. So I filed, when I was there, we were talking to legislators the other day, and one of them said, I filed 17 or 21 bills or something like that. Well, that's not unusual. We may not like that, agree with it, but that's another question. You can file all kinds of bills. It's not going to guarantee you're going to get them heard. But if you've got a bill like nullify Obamacare, you might have a problem getting that bill heard. Or trying to require that state agencies comply with lobbying types of requirements and laws and regulations like everybody else does. They go down there and lobby for more money all the time and stuff. So there's really not a problem with hearing with this proposal, which says if a member wants his bill heard, all he has to do is ask in writing to have it heard. It gets heard. You know that we recognize all kinds of people all the time up there. Groups come in. We don't even meet in session very long, many days, and probably most of the days. So there's time to hear the bills. The number of bills that are being denied for the reasons that we're talking about today are a small number. It's not that big number, and now we're going to have to hear all those. They love to use that one. It's real effective because even a lot of legislators fall for that, but a lot of citizens that are just kind of out there in the periphery that might hear that argument, it's real easy, and with the temperature of a lot of people, they don't like where government's at today. They don't trust it. They don't want more of it. They want less of it. It kind of scares some people into the corner that, well, maybe this isn't a good idea because we're going to have to hear all the bills now. What if they have a bill that's going to do, X? It's real important to know that that's not a real true problem. We're talking about a small number of bills that they pick and choose, or maybe sometimes it might be the Chamber of Commerce or somebody, or the Teachers Association doesn't like it, so they won't hear it.
And they spend a lot of time recognizing the Class 2A high school lacrosse team and renaming some drainage ditch after a coach or something.
You forgot birthdays, too. You hear those sung all the time. Representative Key, as you know, I'm with the Second Amendment Association, and we face exactly what you just touched on. It's state money, our tax dollars being used to lobby against our rights. And we actually this year have 2 bills we're introducing in both the House and the Senate. And it's one of the 37 bills we've had introduced this year. So taxpayer dollars cannot be used against the Second Amendment. We need to get that anchored so we can apply it to other agencies and so forth, because I have sat there and watched the OSBI lobby against us on my tax dollars. I've seen higher ed lobby against us. Maybe you can highlight more on that too.
Oh, gosh. When Brogdon and I were pushing and we passed the Anti-Real ID Act in 2007, and then we were trying to add to that in the next 3 years, we were battling the DPS like crazy. And they would tell us one thing to our face, and then they'd go do the opposite with other members. And then I would call them out on it, and Randy would. Randy played the nice guy, I played the bad cop. It just kind of turned out that way. And this was something really happened for about 3 years. And I would call them out, and they'd go, no, I didn't go talk to those guys or something like that. And I had legislators tell me that they've voted against some of our proposals along the way because DPS came up and kind of strong-armed them into voting that way. So, yeah, we have that problem all the time. And you have state agency lobbyists, like these would be, that's what I'm going to refer to them as, and private lobbyists they've got real good access to that speaker's room and lots of other those handful of leaders, and they can talk to them all day long. Who knows what goes on behind closed doors and what kind of things are said. But that's a big problem. There's been proposals over the years to try to restrict all state agencies, I referred to this already once, all state agencies or anyone in those that's a state employee to come up there and lobby, or at least some of the proposals in the past have at least tried to make them fall into a lobbyist, fall into the lobbyist loop to register, disclose who they talked to, what they did, stuff like that. But that gets fought too. And so, again, when you have a bill like this or anything that you can think of, like we're talking about right now, or anything else, if it doesn't get heard, nobody's going to know. Very few people know. You need to have the bills heard so that they'll know that they're not hearing them or how they're voting on them.
I just wanted to add one further clarification on that first question or the previous question. The idea that we can't hear all the bills is what will happen if open government gets instituted in the rules, there will actually be a lot fewer bills filed. When I was in the legislature, and when Charles was in there, I'm sure he did it too, we would have a constituent come in and say, I want to do something to ban water witching or something, you know, or I want to make sure all the water towers are painted red. And you go, well, I don't know, and say, well, I'll have them draft a bill for it. So you send off, and they draft a bill, and then you send it on to committee, and they don't hear it. Well, if open government means all the bills can be heard if you want them heard, then you can't use that ruse to lie to your constituents anymore. And I would maintain fewer bills would clog up the process.
Yeah, and I really agree with that. I think that's true. Gosh, you talk about an idea that would, you know, a proposal like this that would reform in a lot of ways. Porter's exactly right, I believe. Because, and here's how we can know this. This is real important. Again, I referred to about 2/3 of the states function like our state does. Well, there's a whole bunch of states out there that the world's not coming to an end, you know, because they hear the bills. I was in Nebraska years ago, learned that they do the same thing in Nebraska. They require a hearing of a bill. Public can come to it. Every bill gets an open hearing. And there's no reason it can't be done. You know, it doesn't cause problems in a legislative body. Matter of fact, like Porter said, it causes more responsibility by the people that are there because the light's being shown on them and everything.
Charles, it seems to me that every bill should be heard because every constituent has a right to hear his bill heard, no matter how inane it might be. Anything less than that is not representational government.
Well, I appreciate that point, and there's nothing wrong with it, but here's the fact is, like the guy that filed 17 bills, and when some of us file a lot of them, there's some bills we file to address an issue that we might need to address, or that today it looks like, however it looks, whatever the situation is. But then, you know, they start drafting them about this time of the year, maybe a little bit earlier. Well, but by the time you get into January, February, you might not need that bill. It might have been addressed in a different way. There might be 5 other legislators that have the same idea, and they all filed the same bill. So should you hear all the exact same bill? Or maybe everybody can come together and get behind one bill, and everybody put their name on it, or something like that. There's bills that committee chairmen have to, and I happen to believe this is a legitimate function. They have extra bills filed to deal with things that might need to be dealt with. I don't personally have a problem with that. Now, somebody might. But if we hear all the bills, then some of those bills are really insignificant. They're not important or not even valid or effective anymore. So that's why I wrote it like this, both because it goes straight to the issue, and secondly because it takes away the argument that we can't hear all the bills. And that's here's another important thing on hearing all the bills, and we'll have too many bills to hear, is that the legislature can decide how many bills that a member has a right to be heard. So let's say you file 15 bills. Well, if the legislature decided that a member can only have 5 bills, that they have the guarantee that it will be heard if they want them heard. Well, you just limited the number of bills that you are going to have to hear, obviously. I don't even think that's necessary, and I'll tell the TW story in a minute, maybe if we have time.
Yeah, let's get to a couple more questions. Just for the record, since we're recording this, here is the proposal for open government that we're seeking. This is the rule that we want instituted. A bill shall be heard and receive a vote in committee if the primary author requests it in writing. And then the same rule would apply on the floor if it gets out of committee. So that's it.
Thank you for coming, Mr. Key. I have not read that sparse document of the Oklahoma Constitution. I understand it's 900 pages long. But an associate of ours used to go to High Noon Club, Woody, told me of a pesky little sentence in that Constitution that demanded that every bill be heard on the floor 3 times. So every session of the legislature is unconstitutional if, in fact, that sentence is there. Is it?
Well, you got me. I have to plead ignorance on that. I'm not sure what the answer is to that.
We'll do a keyword search and find out.
Addressing a legislator, what would you recommend? What would be our response when they say, there's too many bills that they can't all be heard? What would we say?
If you're bold enough, I mean, and everybody's not the same. Everybody doesn't feel like being confrontational, but I just confront it head on. I said, wait a minute, we're not talking about hearing every bill. We're talking about hearing bills that members want to have heard. And there's enough time to hear bills. You just go straight to the things that we've already talked about. But don't let them get away with it, no matter what you say or how you say it. Don't accept it. Don't let them get away with saying, well, we've got too many bills already, we can't hear them. We don't have enough time or whatever. It's just simply not true. It's not true that there's not enough time. There's only a few bills that need to be, that they're denying, and it's what I've already previously described to you. Does anybody else have a question?
We're going to take one more question from the floor, and then I want you to address, the smoke screens and the tricks that they might try and play on us to look like they're trying to address this.
You mentioned Real ID, and there's a big push this year to go ahead and comply. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't really want to be tracked any more than you do, and I think everybody in this room. I don't think we need it. It's always something, isn't it? There's always something more that they have to have, they need all the time. We don't need a Real ID. I'm against it. I'm going to limit my comments on that because I'll get off on it.
Charles, go ahead and tell us what they might try and pull on us instead of doing what they ought to do here.
Okay, how much time do I have, John? You got 5 minutes. Okay, so I mentioned this got heard in 2011. So that bill got heard in 2011, and that encouraged a lot of people. There was a lot of talk and primarily a lot of confrontation in the closed-door caucus meetings that we had, that the Republicans had prior to that in the 2 or 3 years before that. And so I brought that bill forward in 2011. It barely failed. I described how that happened. Now there's a lot of interest. And as many of you know, they start the process of electing the next speaker of the House in that first session, 2 years. We used to not do that, but they started doing it because some people like that. They like the power and they like the title and all that stuff. So they want to get it started early. So the next speaker's race started pretty much right then. It was Jeff Hickman and T.W. Shannon, as everybody knows here, most people. And what I'm going to say next, I like T.W. Shannon, since this is recorded. I really like him. Most people that know him know he's a nice guy. He's a respectable man. He's a good Christian. I don't agree with a lot of the things he's done or some of the votes he's cast, but he was probably one of the most conservative, maybe the most conservative speaker that we've had for the short time he was there for 1 year. But here's what happened. So the 2011 first day, we had this issue come up. It failed. Some time started going by. And so Hickman and TW are going around lobbying, campaigning for votes among Republican members to be the next speaker. So Hickman never wanted to talk about this issue. He wouldn't even talk about it. There was one time it kind of came up that somebody else brought it up, and he was in the little circle of a handful of people. Didn't want to talk about it. Never came and talked to me about it, but lots of members were coming around to me and talking about it and talking to each other about this after that 2011 vote the first day. And then they were trying to get me to support T.W. Shannon. And they even had some other members that we all know that to come over and try to lobby me to get me on board. And, they're all trying to get their votes. And so one day T.W. comes up to my desk. Some of you remember I sat at that front desk right there where they use the microphone all the time. And he came up and he said, Key, let's talk about this proposal. And so he sits down in the chair there, and some other guys kind of gathered around or just listening, and we start talking about it. We start going down the points just like this book does, talking about the issue and then talking about the objections, and he was bringing the objections up. So I was responding to his objections like we're doing right now. And we're going down the line. There's not enough time. There's too many bills. There's, another one they'll bring up. We've got to protect our members from votes that the other party, Democrats in this case, will try to bring up just to embarrass or get us on record to try to beat us in the next election. So we need the leadership to not hear certain bills. Like if one in particular in the past was the Democrats, a Democrat had proposed that we eliminate sales tax on groceries. Do that for the low income and poor people. Well, that was one that got mentioned in the past that we can't allow that. We don't want our members to be potentially sacrificed in a future election because a vote like that gets twisted around or blown out of proportion. So we're going down all these objections, and so we get down to I'm arguing the principle. I think it's a moral issue, and this is what I'd suggest that you do in your way, that it's really immoral for someone, I'm going to say from the panhandle of Oklahoma, wherever they might be from Podunk, Oklahoma, that happened to end up being a committee chairman or a speaker, to say to someone else that I sent up there, that I elected, nope, not going to let you have a voice, not going to let you talk about your proposal. I think it's a moral issue, personally. So we're at that point in the conversation. I'm telling TW that, I said, look, this is a fundamental issue. Free speech, the ability to represent. Representation is a cornerstone of our system of government. And so he says, well, that could be, he starts giving all the objections. We might be here forever. We got so many bills, and everybody's going to want to have their bills heard. No. And I'll make the same arguments I've already made here. It's not going to turn out that way. And he goes, well, I think it will. I said, well, and then somebody brought up the 8 limit. Right now there exists some rule that sounds like the number is 8, is the magic number of bills that you can have heard. You ask a member now, they probably can't even tell you what the exact rule is. But its intent is to give the impression that you only can have 8 bills for consideration to be heard in a committee or to be heard. They don't even honor that rule. So that comes up. And somebody says, well, we've got the 8 rule right now. And I laughed, and some other guys laughed and said, yeah, right. They don't even honor that rule. And I said, but, you could limit it to 8 if you wanted to. And then that gets kicked around. You can imagine some guys sitting around just kicking around some ideas like that. Somebody saying, yeah, 8 might be good. No, 8's still too many, I think. Maybe 6, maybe 5. Maybe 5. So that's the way the conversation is going. And it goes down to 5. And I said, you could make it, we need to pass this rule that's being proposed. But then the legislature could come in and say, but there's a maximum of 5. And then I think TW spoke up and said something like, well, I don't know, but 5 might be too many. He started doing the math. 5 times 100 members, you got 500, those kind of games are being played. And then he says, I don't know, 5 might be too many. I said, well, how about 3? Would 3 be more reasonable? It doesn't matter what the number is. You can just choose the number. I don't know, 3, and people are kicking around. And I said, well, TW, how about 1? Would you be for 1 bill? Every member has the right to have 1 bill. And he goes, well, I'm not and then he got up and said, I got to go do something. You got to walk off and leave. He got caught and backed into a corner, having to admit whether he'd be for a member having the right to have even 1 bill heard. This really drives home the point of what this is all about. It's all about who gets to decide. And the people have already decided. They already elected 101 members up there. We already have rules. There's not chaos in the streets. There's not confusion about what do we do now. We've been doing it for decades, for hundreds of years. That's not the issue. The issue is, do we have government of and by and for the people? That's really what it gets down to. And if you can't send somebody up there to represent you and to fully represent you, like, the pregnant analogy, you can't be partially pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not. You either have the right to go up there and be heard, or you do not. Otherwise, they're just letting you have something that gives the appearance of being equal to the leadership. So, any more
Great
questions?
story. Okay, it's 1 o'clock. Here's the nuts and bolts, and then we'll call it a day. This is going to be a fight that we're going to be going through out this session. Our first opportunity is to get the legislators themselves to change their own rules. And they can do that on day 1 if we tell them that they can and they must. If they don't do that, we're still going to keep going. Even if they do that, we're still going to keep going, because then someone needs to file a bill to put it in statute that says they have to play by those rules. And then once they do that, we need to go beyond it. We need to put it on the ballot, and we need to put it in the state constitution that they have to hear all the bills. So you can see there's a hierarchy that as we work this strategy right down. But it begins today with you taking these pamphlets and giving them to the senators and the representatives that you know ASAP before the new year. And then the rest of them will mail. So please, $5 a piece, 3 for $10. Take them off the table, sign up, and let's get these out there. Next week, our speaker is going to be Sergeant Bryce Lockwood. He was on the USS Liberty that was attacked off the coast of Israel. He's going to tell us about his experience and what that might mean. And please thank Charles for being our guest today.